Hi, my name is Juan, and welcome to The Couch, a podcast where real therapists talk about real things. Please remember that we are therapists, but we are not your therapists, and this podcast is intended for educational purposes only. ADHD. So that stands for Attention Deficit Hyperactive Disorder. If you're new to the podcast, I want to share with you. I think it was around middle elementary school. Definitely elementary school. I go back and I think about my own struggle with ADHD. Well, I'm going to just call it a favorite memory, and that's going to be a unique term I'm using, favorite. This was a time in college, yes. My brain's a little scattered. Undergrad at UNCG, go Spartans. So I was at UNCG and I'm taking physics, which at this point I'm like, why was I taking physics? Background story. Originally I was trying to see if med school was the way that I was going to go. Today I am a counselor, so med school is not the direction that I finished at. Well, I was with all my friends hanging out, studying. And this memory, I call it a favorite memory because I remember when we would study, my friends would say, hey, you're probably going to get the highest grade, right? And they said that for whatever reason. I like to think that maybe they saw some brightness in a young Juan at that point. What would happen, though? What would happen is that we would take the test, and out of all of my friends, I'd get the lowest grade, right? Something will happen in there. Years later, I started to find out that had a lot to do with ADHD, attention deficit hyperactive disorder. What happened is I would show up to that test and I would forget. I would get distracted. I'd focus on the noise. What is that random noise? What's going on? Who's walking out there in the hallway? It'd be the oddest thing. And then I would struggle with it. I would think to myself, man, am I stupid? Something wrong with me? It wasn't later until I started connecting the dots and saying, hey, no, I'm not broken. I'm not broken. This is just a symptom, one of the layers of executive functioning that impact ADHD. Today's episode is on time management, why it's so hard, and what actually helps when we focus on ADHD, attention deficit hyperactive disorder. Now remember, ADHD has to do with executive functioning. And you've got these domains of executive functioning. One of the layers is time management. And that is connected to ADHD. If you constantly feel behind, maybe you're late on things, maybe you get overwhelmed, time just disappears on you somehow. Well, this episode's for you. Maybe you said this to yourself at some point. One of those deep conversations that we all have. I don't know where the day went. You ever said to yourself, like, man, I don't know where the day went? And it's odd. I get this from people with ADHD and they go, yeah, I've said that. I've said it today before my counseling session with you, Dr. Santos. Where did the day go? And it's an interesting symptom connected to time management. So as I mentioned, today we're going to talk about ADHD. We're going to look at tools that you can use, you could plug in to support that ADHD brain. So let's start with breaking down why time management is different with ADHD. ADHD, my friends, is not a lack of motivation. It is not a lack of intelligence, right? ADHD is not those things. It's a difference. It's a difference in how the brain just sees the world, interacts with the world, and how the brain manages attention, time, energy. Right? So if ADHD could talk to you, it would say, hey, I'm in here in your brain, and look, I look at time differently. I pay attention differently. I deal with energy differently. But it doesn't mean that you're not intelligent. It doesn't mean that you're not motivated. So a common example of what I hear in the counseling room, someone will sit down with me and they'll share. They say, hey, I may be in a situation where I'm having to answer one email. And suddenly, as I went into this one task of answering one email, it's an hour later. And now I'm trying to organize my desk. And then the person tells me, not only did time get away from me, I went on a whole different task. I went in and started organizing my desk. When I went back to do my email, set up my email, I started researching some stuff. I went into this whole rabbit hole. So then I asked them, did you get the email sent? Nope, I never even got to the email. Right? And this isn't someone saying I'm not intelligent. They're not saying I'm not motivated, because look, it takes intelligence and it takes motivation to do the things that they did. Yes, they did not answer that email. However, they did clean their desk. They did research a whole bunch of stuff. Another example is someone fully intends, right? They fully intend to be somewhere on time. And then they just really underestimate. Maybe there's a struggle there. They underestimate how long something takes. This is one that I've continued to work on in my own life. I may have my own doctor's appointment at 2 o'clock, and it's 12 o'clock, and I'm at home, and I go, I think I could take a shower and do the laundry, put it up. I should be able to knock that out and leave time to get to the waiting room and sit for like 10 minutes to chill. Next thing you know, it's 1:59, and I'm walking into the doctor's office, and I go, barely made it. It is not a sign of being unintelligent, and it's not a sign of unmotivated. ADHD, my friends, it affects time awareness, which is very different than effort. Because if you notice, all those examples I gave you, effort was taking place. Someone was putting effort into the process. One of the biggest ADHD challenges is this area of time blindness. So here's what it means for the brain. Time blindness means that your noggin, right, your brain, it has this struggle to, how do I word this? Let's imagine time was a pathway. Your brain has a hard time to see this pathway and all the intricacies of it, the start point and the end point. So playing this out a little bit further, 10 minutes and 1 hour can feel very equal, right? And if you're listening to this and you have ADHD, imagine if you said it to yourself, all right, I got 10 minutes to do this. I got 1 hour to do this. Sometimes that can feel very similar. You may react to it very similar. What takes place is that because of this blindness, right? I mentioned that road, you're not able to see it. Because of this blindness, being on time, completing a deadline, you don't see it. It's so distant from you. Until, bam, in your face, it suddenly becomes this, shoot, I got to get this done. It's urgent now. This is why often individuals sit with me. They often feel that they're in crisis. There's an urgency, which makes sense, because if you have the time blindness, so you're doing a project and you're working, and then you're like, it's only going to take 10 minutes, but it takes 15 minutes, it takes 30 minutes, it takes 2 hours. And then next thing you know, you're now late on all the other projects you have to do. That's going to create an internal crisis mode, an urgency within you. And as you could probably assume, someone with this would also struggle with procrastination. And as some may be thinking, how does it impact the nervous system? Well, it does. The nervous system becomes stimulated, becomes engaged. Now, traditionally, there's different tools out there that can be supportive. Examples could be using a planner, taking breaks, pushing yourself to be motivated, setting New Year goals. The challenge with those is not necessarily that they're ineffective. Those are wonderful tools. They're heavily studied, applied in different settings, all the way from a mental health session to a executive leadership coaching session. Right, one of those could be like a SMART goal, the acronym SMART. Right, that goes heavily into leadership. You'll see it within executive sectors, big companies utilize practices like that to advance employee growth. Here's the challenge, though. ADHD brain, again, right? It has a time blindness, and what happens is that you try to throw in this activity of, let's do, get a plan or write everything out on there. Well, with my ADHD, I may say to you, hey, getting started is hard. Estimating time is hard. Switching between tasks is hard. Sustaining attention is hard, right? So those 4 components there that I shared with you, starting a task, sustaining attention, switching between tasks, estimating how long a task will take, right? Those 4 components are why sometimes the traditional things to do become a challenge. Because traditional advice could be, hey, Juan, listen, I see that you're struggling with time management. Why don't you just get that calendar and write everything out all there? Well, yes, the calendar is effective, right? We're not knocking the calendar. The calendar is effective. I, however, want to acknowledge that one of my struggles with ADHD is starting a task. It's estimating how long it'll take, sustaining attention, switching between tasks. So it's not solely the calendar that I want to use, or the planner, excuse me. I want to be able to implement a system within the planner that is focused on starting things on time, putting in how much time something will actually take, identifying what I can do to sustain attention, and eliminating factors that will impact me from switching between tasks. So now we look at how ADHD time struggles show up in the real world, right? We talked a little bit about that, but let's go a little bit further. Real world is Bob down the street running late, right? Even when he's trying really hard to get there on time. Real world could be that you're at work and you've got these things to do, and you notice that day after day you keep avoiding tasks that are just heavy, overwhelming, because they feel mentally heavy. It's feeling overwhelmed, even by small tasks. It's hyper-focusing, and sometimes hyper-focusing on the wrong thing. It's feeling a sense of shame because you're not able to get things done. You may even internalize it and say, man, what's wrong with me? Can't get these things done. For adults with ADHD, especially individuals that are in a mental health setting, working with a counselor, and later in life you're diagnosed, you may find, and this is what I've learned along the years. Different individuals share this with me. They'll say, hey, number one, appreciation for learning that, all right, ADHD is what's been happening in my life. But then they'll say, look, for years I've been actually blaming myself, criticizing myself, feeling guilty, feeling shame. And my hope is that today, as you're listening to this episode, again, you're not broken. You're not unintelligent. You're not unmotivated, right? ADHD is a real life factor that impacts the brain and how it interacts with the world. I want to share with you now some what I like to call ADHD-friendly time management methods, strategies, tips to implement. First one I want to go to is that time blindness, right? So if your brain says, look, I can't see the road, so then what we want to do is we want to say, I finally hear you, which means ADHD needs to see time. Put a visual timer in the kitchen, in the house, in different places. Have one even that does countdowns. Remember, a timer is not there for pressure. It's literally there for information so that you can see the information in front of you. Second item to do that you can plug in, and I would encourage one at a time. Don't overdo it. Take your time. Is instead of scheduling tasks by how long it will take, shift over to scheduling by the energy it'll take. So if I've got 4 tasks and each one takes 10, 15, 20 minutes, I want to see which one's the heaviest. And what this does is this reduces burnout and then increases workflow. Keeps me in a nice rhythm. Let's start with those 2. I thought about today's episode and I thought about, just adding more and more and more. I think that can be overwhelming too when there's a bit too much. I wanted it to be short and sweet. So if you're listening and thinking, this explains my life, man. This explains me. This explains what I've been going through. Well, I'm right there with you. I'm high-fiving you, smiling, dabbing, whatever you want, whatever handshake we can do to make it right. Start with 1 and then see what happens. you found this episode helpful, number one, I'm glad, right? That's the purpose of this podcast, to bring resources to you. If you found it helpful, share it with a friend. Help us grow the podcast here. You can do that by leaving a review. It's one of the most important things. Let us know what you're enjoying about it. I'll see you in the next episode.